You're watching Game Tech Talk. And Get a Grip Gaming is responsible for this beautiful custom built controller that I designed after one of my favorite video game characters of all time, which I hope you know who it is. Leave it in the comments, ask me the question, or let me know who you think it is, because I won't be telling you in this video. I want you to guess. This product was sent for review by Get a Grip Gaming. Of course, they don't get to say my opinions, and they also get to see the video at the same time as everybody else. So let's first go over what you get if you buy one of their controllers. Now, of course, this case, which is custom branded with their logo. Inside of the case is the controller that you saw in the introduction. Can't tell me it isn't beautiful. It's so gorgeous. It really looks the part. I love the way that it has the sheen as well. 8 different buttons of 2 different styles, which we'll talk about a little later. And then you also have this QR card. Now, there are a lot of different ways that you can build a Get a Grip Gaming controller for yourselves. Let's first go over the website and how the whole building process happens. The moment you're on the website, you'll see the custom builder, and you can customize any aspects of your controller: the front shell, the touchpad, the trims, buttons, joystick, name it. You can do a color scheme based off of what you want, the style that you think would look best, and then from there they will build it for you. You can also add extra add-ons, for example, the back buttons that you've seen, Hall effect sticks, tactile buttons, tactile face buttons, and tactile bumpers and triggers. And once you're ready, you can add to cart, and after a couple of days, you'll receive your brand new custom built controller. And the one you see here is fully decked out. It feels and looks and is very much a DualSense when it comes to the board, but everything else around it has changed. Now, it's not my first time that I talk about controllers that have this approach on this channel, but never was I able to fully customize it myself. And this is the kind of service that this company provides. They also push it a little further in some of the components. So while yes, it is a DualSense controller, there's a lot more that is being done to completely change its DNA and its purpose. When thinking of a DualSense controller, it's very much a jack of all trades, but this is what I would call a master of one. It almost sounds condescending, but I think it's very, very laser focused in one very specific direction and for very specific consumers, which are competitive pro player. But if you're not, I would argue that you may want to watch till the end, because you might be shocked at how efficient this controller can be for specific things. Usually what you have on a regular PlayStation controller are membrane buttons. So they have that mushy side to them. You push them all the way. These ones, they're fully low travel tactile. For example, my face buttons, they don't push down, and they have this very distinct tactile sound. Same goes for the D-pad. The D-pad doesn't push down anymore. It's not a membrane, it's a tactile. Here's a sample. The same is done on the shoulders and triggers button. Here's the shoulders. And here are the triggers. Very, very low travel. Like, it's to the point that you think about pushing the button, you put your finger on there, and boom, it's actuated. You know, if you play something like Fortnite, a lot of Call of Duty, or really any competitive game, this is something that is highly coveted because it is such a rapid execution. You also have the 8 buttons in the back. You have the included buttons that I've mentioned, which you can change the ones by default. Here you have that little nub, and you can put this over. And the 2 styles that you have is these ones, which are concave, and then the other ones, which is what you have here, that are convex. They each have a certain quality to them, and I'll elaborate. When you're using the knobs, one thing that I was not expecting and was very, very pleasantly surprised is, you know, sometimes you have some buttons that you really have to put your finger on top to actuate, whereas sometimes you have buttons that are almost like sticks where you can push off to the side and it will still actuate. These ones is how they will behave and how they will feel. You're able to actuate them from not necessarily hitting right dead on center, but also from the sides. The moment you put this cap, suddenly you can no longer hit it from the sides. And it's not so much that the button is different, it's just the way that the cap will prevent you from doing such a thing. And I find it does a great job at giving you more surface for your fingers. And if you use the concave one, I find that that one is kind of in between. You can also hit it from the sides, also hit it from the top, but I also like that it caresses the finger a bit more in terms of comfort. Personally, this is my favorite. They all hold very nicely. Like once you install them, they haven't come off in any kind of way. That's another benefit that you have with this system. I was curious, if anything, and once I got accustomed to them, this is probably the best claw grip controller that I've used, and I'll explain why further down this video. And then you have the Hall Effect sticks, which no drift, usually a stronger reaction time, more precise, all the benefits that we come to know. You know, if ever Get a Grip Gaming gets into the comments of this video, maybe they can confirm, but I'm pretty sure that they have taken their time to really tweak the curvature of your sticks. So let's start with the left one. The left one is extremely aggressive. The moment you hit it, first, there's very little dead zone, to not say no dead zone at all. But the moment you push forward, your character is more likely to run than to walk. It's very immediate the way that your character is going to run. In a gunfight, you want to be juking left and right, so this stick will assist you at being more efficient with ramping up your curve much faster. And it is the case with the right stick also, but I find while it is definitely what I would consider to be an aggressive curve, it is not as aggressive as the left stick. Personally, usually I like a stick to be more linear, more persistent in its growth. I was not expecting the outcome I got, because usually I'm not one to go into an aggressive curve, but I'm not also pretending to fully understand the market that this is tailored for. Now, another thing is, of course, these are now buttons. They're no longer analog triggers like you have on the regular DualSense. So you lose the haptic feedback if you put that option, which you can, as we've seen in the tweaking. If you don't want that, you don't have to put it on. But also, if you put the tactile buttons, they will remove the rumble. This is something that is extremely common in the competitive scene. A lot of people buy their controllers, the first thing they do, they open it, they cut off the rumble motor, they take it out. Removing the motor has actually reduced the weight by a little. And if you're in the middle of a gunfight and you need to move by like 0.5 millimeter, you don't want rumble because a grenade just exploded next to you to kind of shift off your aiming. You want to be precise. Not having rumble, you will not have this extra element that, while it does offer immersiveness, it can also make you miss your shots. And this is why, and they do that by default. But if you were to order one for yourself and you want the tactile buttons and you want to keep the rumble motor, you can ask them to do so and they will make sure to leave them in there. Always on the up and coming and the competitive scene is Gyro. And if we think of a controller that I reviewed on the channel, like the Victrix BFG, for example, Gyro is removed from that controller. Rest assured that it is present on this one, so you can fully utilize Gyro. Now, before we talk about what it's like when in game, let's just finish the conversation with ergonomics. For the most part, there's not much to say because this is a DualSense. This is what you should expect. But one thing that might come to mind is, well, how about those buttons? Do they get in the way? And I have to say, not at all. In fact, it's kind of like this grip where it really gives you a nice hold because those buttons kind of nudge in between your fingers. It's actually quite pleasant to use. So no, it's not in the way at all. These buttons don't bother me. But if you go into claw grip, then of course, coming from a standpoint of they actually serve a purpose, which is to be able to redirect your buttons to these little nubs. The ergonomic does not change to the point that you would not recognize this controller. It has more to do with the buttons and the way that they feel. This is a great controller to have as a companion to a regular one, because you'll probably want a regular DualSense for something like Astrobot. But when you want to get in the zone, when you want to get into a fight and you want to make sure to come out the winner out of that fight, this is a very, again, and I repeat my words here, but this is an extremely laser focused controller. And I understood that the moment that I forced myself into claw grip, because I'll be honest, yes, I'm familiar with it, but I don't really play that way. As good as it is when holding it regularly with your 8 fingers on the nubs, it is sort of difficult to rewire your brain. So I forced myself into the claw grip mode. And the moment I did that, I was like, oh wow, this is freaking amazing. And I just reviewed the Wolverine V3 recently. I just reviewed the Tarantula Pro, which I also think is a great controller for claw. This one comes out on top. It's just so well designed. And one thing that I feel is extremely clever with this system, doubling my mappings. And what I mean by that is, for example, I used these two knobs to dash, I used these two knobs to jump, and these two knobs to reload. And with that grip, I was able to really hit all my buttons at the same time without ever letting go of my sticks. And when doing that, suddenly my aim is a lot better with this right stick now than if I was using the regular grip. And that shocked me, because usually I'm not one to go for such an aggressive curve, but I guess this hold allows me to have finer motions with my thumb. Definitely something that caught me off guard. And I actually want to take a moment to talk about those specific sticks that I've picked, which are kind of made of gel. And if you get one, if you build one for yourself, get those sticks. Oh my lord, are these sticks ever so good. You know, if ever you did that as a kid, you have those quarter machines and they give you a slime and it's like a hand and you stick it on the wall and then it comes back. It kind of feels like that, but it doesn't gather dust and grease like those slimy things that we would get as kids. Super great in terms of just the hold, the grip that it gives me. It hasn't faded so far. I don't know if it's gonna fade rapidly. I hope not, because man, do these feel amazing. Back to the claw grip. I guess I understand why a lot of people do that. And again, there are many other grips. There's a grip that is fully designed around using the trackpad as you're aiming. But even if you do that, because you have your extra buttons on each side, you can really reposition yourself in the middle of a gunfight and still have something that'll work, as long as you double your pairings on both your left and right side of your controller. Because it's symmetrical, I find that it allowed my brain to kind of know, what's the word? Instinct. It operated on instinct when I had set it up. Which, talking about, how do you set up these buttons? So you want to hold L1, R1, left D-pad, and square. And by holding all four, the light is going to blink. And once it stops blinking, it means you're entered pairing mode. So you want to hold the button as well as the regular button that you want to pair. And they're going to blink again for about a second. And that means the pairing has been done. And now your button will behave as the key that you're trying to remap. Very simple, easy to do, easy to remember. I do have two cons about this, however. The first is, unfortunately, and I don't know if that has to do with just being compliant with the competitive scene, but you cannot map any of the 8 buttons to your L2 and R2, which I find is a little bit unfortunate. You can do your phase buttons, your D-pads, your L1, R1, but you cannot do L2, R2. You cannot do function buttons. Function buttons, I expected it. You cannot do the trackpad click either, and the PlayStation button. Now that is con number 1. Con number 2 is, as amazing as this system is, if you change games often, it also means that you may have to redo some mappings based off of what and how you want to use it. I do wish there were profiles on the controller. There were a way to quickly change. So that's a bit of an unfortunate side. Past that, it's more a question of, okay, just set it right the first time and you're not gonna have to change it again. One thing that I do want to point out that I did notice when testing the performance of the sticks is you have what is called stick jitter or stick tremor, which these ones do display the tremor, but I did ask Get a Grip Gaming and they said that's normal. It's because they're running software to make sure your sticks remain extremely precise. This is what the jitter comes from. There was not a single time that I noticed, and I did look for it, there was not a single time that I noticed any kind of jitters in my game. It really is just displayed when looking at the sticks when gamepad tester or all of sorts. So I wanted you guys to know that this is a thing, but it does not affect your gameplay in any possible way. Also, you have the pogo pins at the bottom, and I confirm this docks just fine on the official dock. If you're using third-party ones, you might have issues because of these things, but as far as the official one goes, it works just fine. Now let's talk about price. It will be anywhere between $125 to $390 US. So that depends on how you configure the controller. If you think of the fact that this is a controller you're gonna buy once, because Hall effect pretty much means no drift, and it's not impossible, but for a Hall effect to drift, it means that the magnet has to lose power, and magnets usually last upwards of a century, if not more. So it's very unlikely that it will drift in this lifetime. unless it is a defect. So it's really a controller you buy once. But I do believe that it is important to identify if this is the right controller for you. If you're looking for aesthetic and you want to purchase it, of course, that's where it's going to cost you the least. But for example, if you are ordering this controller, do you need the tactile triggers, shoulders, and tactile buttons? I would argue that if you take this 8-button array, you probably wouldn't need the tactile buttons here, because the goal is to repurpose these buttons so that you don't use them as much. So that's already a good chunk of money that you're saving if you don't need those. But it does come down to what you want. Of course, getting a controller like this and not getting Hall effect would be a little weird almost, but if you don't want Hall effect, you don't have to. That's up to you. You build it the way that you want. If you don't care for the triggers because you want to keep them adaptive, you can do that as well, but still have tactile buttons and D-pad, or have the 8-button, or not have the 8-button and put everything tactile. That's up to you. If you don't want to hear anything about using the claw method and you want to stick to your controllers regularly, maybe not having these 8 buttons but rather having tactile everywhere is the way to go. That all comes down to what your preferences are. What I can definitely say is it does feel awesome to have tactile everywhere. I did not expect it to like it as much as I do. And is that the controller I'm going to bring into Astrobot? Of course not. But for anything that requires precision and I don't care for rumble, definitely that I will. Now, the other solution also is they have on their website the Ocho Pro. I hesitated for a good 30 minutes when I built that one because I was like, oh man, the Ocho looks so good. So get a grip if you want to send me the second one. Feel free to do so, you know what I mean? Kidding aside, the pre-baked option also looks the part. And when you go pre-baked, you have all the changes and modifications that you can throw at this controller. So if you don't want to break your head with building your own, you can just go for the Ocho. It looks great, and you're gonna have tactile everywhere. You're gonna have Hall effect sticks, and you're gonna have the 8-button array. The takeaway is, are you a competitive player? And if you are, what is important for you in your competitive approach? If you're telling me, oh, I'm a Rocket League competitive player, you never would want to go for these tactile triggers, but you might benefit from these tactile buttons. You might benefit from these 8 buttons. So it all comes down to, okay, what does competitive mean to you? And if it is specifically aiming, I would argue that the only way you would want to get this is fully decked out, minus maybe the front buttons. Again, the goal to me is to repurpose these to not have to use those. The 8-button is such a game changer for claw grippers. It really opened up my mind, but I was never as convinced as I was with this one. I always thought, it's cool, but it's not for me. And I guess it wasn't for me because I never had the right tools. And if that speaks to you in any kind of way, yeah, I think it's worth it. And so that is it, guys. Let me know what you think about the Get a Grip Gaming in the comments. And do you know which character this was inspired from? As always, thank you very much for watching. Do consider doing all the YouTube stuff, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.